Hi there, my name's Blake Gerardo and I'm going to demonstrate Humanitarian OpenStreetMap mapping in the Kyrgyzstan region this morning. So we're just going to get started. This is the front page of our tasking manager, and the one thing I want you to notice about the front page is that we offer ways to ask questions. If you don't have another way or another person handy to ask questions to, please just join our mailing list. We also have an IRC channel that lets you just sort of use chat to ask a question, or you can always shoot an email to info@hotosm.org if you have any questions. We're going to be working on project 1235 this morning, so I'm just going to go ahead and type project 1235 into our search bar and hit enter. And this is the project we're going to work on, so I'm just going to click on it. Brings us to our tasking manager, which is responsible for dividing up the mapping tasks. Make sure that we have nice units to work on and that nobody gets into any sort of mapping conflicts or anything like that. So we're just going to use the tasking manager to find a square and start working on it. There's instructions. This is a description of why we're mapping and who asked us to map and how our data is going to be used. But there's also instructions about exactly what they would like us to map and how to tag things. So you should always read the instructions for every mapping project you go through. Read them in detail. Sometimes they change, so you want to review them basically every time you get started. Sometimes priorities change or how they want us to map changes. So definitely look over the instructions before you get started each time. This one we're going to be concentrating on buildings, roads, railways, and bridges. Clicking once, these are task squares. Clicking once on a task square is how I tell it which one I'm going to start working on. There's a legend down here. There's color codes. If we zoom back out, you can see some are green and this one's gray and that sort of thing. So you can look at the color code and figure out what these mean. So this is the one that I want to work on. Doesn't matter how zoomed in you are here. So I'm going to say start mapping. And you can see it immediately highlights it, so I know that somebody's working on this one. It also tells me there's one person working on this project in general. This task is what we call locked. If I had to stop mapping before I finished mapping all of the buildings, I would just unlock it so somebody else could then work on it. If I did manage to map every single thing in this task square that I've been asked to map, and all the roads, all the buildings, everything was mapped, then I would mark this as done. And I would say this task square has been completed or done. But if I just need to stop and pick it back up later, or start on another one, or do something else, then I would just unlock it. So at the moment it's locked. This actually lets us start editing. I'm going to edit with the ID editor. JOSM is a desktop editor for OpenStreetMap that's pretty easy to use, but it's got a bit of a learning curve. If you like the project and you like doing humanitarian mapping, you should learn how to use JOSM. It's extremely powerful and makes some functions a lot easier. Virtually everybody gets started with the ID editor. That's the web-based editor, and that's the one that we're going to use. And a lot of people stick with the ID editor. It's very lightweight, and anywhere you have a web browser, you have an editor. So we're going to use the ID web editor, and as soon as I select the ID web editor, it's going to take me to that editor. I've already logged in, so it probably would have told you that you need to log in already, but you want to register with OpenStreetMap and log in, and then our tasking manager uses that OpenStreetMap login, so you don't need two. But I'm already logged in, so this went pretty well. You can see there's a purple square here. That purple square is the area that my task square, this is the part that I'm responsible for while I have it checked out. So I'm supposed to map all the entities in this purple square. And you obviously can't map anything this far zoomed out. So I'm going to click on this zoom in to edit. And that zooms me in a fair amount. It's still way too zoomed out to actually edit. So I'm going to keep zooming in. Okay, so this brings up, you can see somebody's already started editing here. And if you read the instructions, they will mention that there's already been some mapping done, but they did it with different imagery in the background. So now it's a little bit offset from the imagery that we're using. So one of the steps in our mapping process is to move all of these already mapped buildings. That's what these squares are. This is map data that indicates it's a building. That's why it's orange. But you can see it doesn't really line up with the buildings that are down here. So our first step is going to be to move some of these buildings and actually line them up properly with the buildings that they apply to. And you can do this one at a time. Somebody already fixed this one. This one is not fixed. But you could click on these, then that's what you do. You select it, and then this they call it the crescent menu. This is the crescent menu of things that you can do to this object. I could rotate it, I could square up its corners, I could move it, I could turn it into a circle, or I could delete it. In this instance, we want to move it. So I just clicked on the move button, and now everywhere, I'm not holding down the mouse key or anything. I'm just moving the mouse, and so now I would be able to move this and put it where it belongs. And you can do these one at a time. It's absolutely fine. But you also can do multiple items at once. So you can click on, these are all offset about the same. So you can click on them, hold down your shift key, and just keep clicking on items, and you see they just keep getting added to the selection. This is a pretty typical way to multiple select objects. So I'm just going to select all the ones I can see here. Why not? And now, the last one I clicked on has I better click on another one, has the move option. So I'm going to click on the move option, and now I'm moving all of these. And since they were all mapped at the same time with the same imagery, I can just line up a couple of these things, and it should line up basically all of them. So you can see I'm basically working on these middle ones in the screen. And once I get them about lined up correctly, as close as I possibly can, I just click and it'll place them. Okay, so we've fixed all of those. Zoom in a little bit and see what's up. Yeah, this one, I do this a lot. I move these off a lot just to see how they are. So this one's not quite, this one doesn't quite cover the building. So let's move this one more time and see what's up. Yeah, so there's kind of, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell if this is one building or two buildings. But I'm going to treat it like two buildings. So you can grab these things, are called nodes. So I'm just going to remap this a little bit. I'm going to treat this like two buildings as one square building. So click on it and square it after I make my little adjustments. So now actual new mapping. This is all working with mapping that somebody else has already done. But now we're going to start mapping new buildings that nobody has mapped. These are our mapping tools. Hopefully you've had an introduction to these mapping tools already. Points would just let me put a single dot and then add some information to it. We don't use points very often in our mapping. The line tool is what was used to draw in these roads. So anything that's a straight line or a curved line, so the roads, waterways, fences, things like that, you generally use the line tool for. But actually mapping in buildings, the buildings we use the area tool, and that's what this means. So I'm going to select the area tool, and this is pretty simple. It's a single click, and I just click and then take my finger off, and you can see now I'm drawing a line that will eventually be the area, one edge of my area. But I'm not holding down the mouse button, I just clicked. Now I'm going to click again in the corner, I'm going to click again in this corner, and I'm going to click in this corner. Now try not to do this. Generally, these buildings are actually pretty super close, but generally these buildings are not connected. So I'm going to try to not. This would connect the buildings, and I could certainly connect them if I thought they were connected, but they're probably not. So I'm just going to click here. I'm going to click here, and just keep zooming in if you can't get precise enough without accidentally snapping to it. So I'm just going to double click to finish that building up. And then, now all I've done is draw the area. My next step is to label this as a building. So you can see there's kind of a stacked card effect here. This is not water or a park. These are called presets. So I'm going to click on my building preset, and it pops down some more specific options. We almost never use the more specific options because we have no idea. Unless we're from this area and we know what this building is, we can't tell what kind of a building it is. So if I slide down a little bit, you can see I can just mark this as a building. That's about all I can really tell from aerial imagery. So I'm just going to go ahead and select building. It gives me the option to fill in more information if I knew it, but since I don't, there's nothing I can really fill in. And my very last step is to click on this, and then do the square. I could also use the keyboard S shortcut, but I'm just going to click on that, and that squares up my corners, and now this building is mapped. Then I zoom back out, and I find another building to map. This looks like a building. So, the buildings are generally light-colored roofs. The darker color is dirt. This is greenery. Sometimes there's lighter colored dirt, but I'm fairly sure that these are backyards. It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, it's dense urban mapping like this where these buildings are really close together. It's just a challenge. So the point is to just take your time and be as accurate as you can be. Only map things that you're pretty sure about. I'm pretty sure that all of these are buildings. If you're not too sure if something's a building or not, like here, it's hard to tell. I'm going to move this out of the way. I do this really often. I just move something. So it's hard to tell what's going on right here. This is for sure a building that was mapped. This is probably another small building in the back, and this is a third building. But I don't know what's going on here. That could be, I don't know, could be an awning or something on this building. So I just moved this out of the way. I come up here and I usually do the undo. I just say undo and let it snap back where it goes. By the way, it's probably time for me to save my mapping. I moved those buildings and I drew a couple of new ones. I generally save every 10 to 20 edits. I'll click on save. If I had done anything wrong that the editor could determine, there would be a yellow warning box here. I don't have a yellow warning box, so everything is good to go. It tells me all the things I did. I modified 15 buildings and I created one. And so I'm just going to, these are the comments that go with this set of changes, which we call a change set. This is mentioned in the instructions on the task, but it automatically gets filled in, so I don't really have to worry about it. So I just say save. And this writes it up to the OpenStreetMap database. You're working on live data, so the minute you hit save, this goes up into the map, and this data's there. So don't worry about it, but just know you're working on live data. So I'm going to map in a couple more buildings. So I'm going to get my area tool, and I just do single click, go to the next corner, single click. This one's a little broken from the imagery, single click, and then double click to finish it off. Now, I could go through this process again and, building and then find my generic building, but the editor remembers the last tag that I used. So I can just click on this building tag, and then I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut to square up my corner. So I'm just going to hit the S key for square, and that squares up that. So this to me looks like another building right here. So this might be a little close. I'm going to kind of move that. And then I'm going to draw on this building here. Whoops. That was going to get my area tool. You'll hit the wrong key. If you start using keyboard shortcuts, you'll hit the wrong key at least every once in a while. So don't worry too much about that. Just hit the escape key and undo whatever it was you did. So now I don't really want to connect this because I don't think these connect. So I'm just going to draw it into here. Whoops, double click to finish it off. Use my building preset. Hit S to square it up. And that one looks pretty good to me. I might get a warning that these buildings overlap. So I'm just going to move this one off of there a little bit. Get it pretty close, but let's get this building drawn. Single click. So if you're not too sure about something, just don't map it. There is a built-in process that this will get reviewed at least once by a person who reviews this task square, and probably get reviewed again by the person who's responsible for the overall project. And it's much easier to see something that's not mapped and say, oh, that needs to be mapped, than it is to have something be mapped that shouldn't be mapped, because then it's covered and you would have to move it off to see if, whoops, double click to finish. You'd have to move it off to see what was really underneath it, and that just makes it a lot tougher. So pretty much try to just map the buildings you're sure about. You'll notice that this looks like it's covered by trees a little bit, but we're trying to map the footprints. So don't just map the area that's exposed. You want to map the whole footprint of the building. This is definitely a building. And this is the process. This is it. Just take your time. Do your best. You're much better off. You know, if your building is not square, this building doesn't look square to me. I mean, it doesn't look like just a simple rectangle. So you just draw these dots. Again, that would connect it to that building, which I don't want to do because it's definitely not connected. So I just double click there, mark it as a building, hit my S key to square it up. And again, I might get a warning about an overlap there. Let's save and see what happens. Nope, no warning. It's perfectly happy with that. That's great. So no warnings. Click on save. That'll upload it to the database. So just do your best. Try and be accurate. It's much better that you're accurate in your mapping than the quantity of mapping that you do. Yeah, for example, this I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if this is a building. So I'm not going to map it. I don't know what that is. That could just be a different colored dirt. That could be, I don't know, cultivated or something, but I can't be sure that's a building, so I'm not going to map that. This I'm pretty sure is a building. So just do your best. Don't worry about speed or how much you get done. Just try and map as accurately as you possibly can, and try not to miss stuff. But if you're not sure, just don't map it. And that's really the best. That's the best policy. Let's see, this looks like a building here. I'm going to move this one. I move buildings out of the way all the time. You can come back here, by the way, to the background settings. And there's a background setting. Perhaps it's there. It's not background setting. This is map data. And then turn off fill areas. This is usually what I do. It's a little bit harder to see, but it makes it easier to see what's underneath. So you can see they get pretty faint. This will be up to you. To me, I prefer to turn it off because I like to see what's underneath. So this looks like another building right here. So I'm going to go ahead and map this building in. So consider trying the wireframe if you find yourself having to look underneath a lot. And again, that's under the settings. Double click, use my preset, S to square it. That's this one here, map data. And then I did fill areas, and partial fill is what it defaults to. Full fill would fill it all in. I often just go with no fill and do the wireframe, but I'll leave that up to you. This looks like a building. So this is challenging. This, looks like a side yard. This is probably a building. This is definitely a building. You can see a ridge line here. So I'm just going to go ahead and map that building in. So I have to run. So I'm not going to be able to finish this square. I'm not going to be able to mark this square done. My next step will just be to unlock this square so that somebody else can work on it. I'm going to mark that one as saved. Say save. You might have multiple tabs open. I'm just going to use the back button in my browser. I'm just going to use the back button in my browser. And that'll get me back to my task. And now I would just unlock this. I can't mark it as done because I didn't map every building. But I can unlock it so somebody else can come in and work on it. So I'm just going to click on unlock. And that's it. And now it's available for somebody else. It keeps track of who worked on it. It says that I unlocked this, and that's great. And now somebody else can work on it. So that's the basics of mapping for this project. It's a challenge. Just take your time, do your best. If you have any questions, hit the front page of our tasking manager and find a way to ask us. Thanks very much for your time.